Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. Okay, so Tinder, right? Everyone's got a story, good or bad. Mine ended up being the kind that keeps you up at night, makes you jump at shadows, and has you questioning every decision you've ever made. I was fresh out of a really bad breakup, feeling vulnerable and stupid, and honestly, just wanting some kind of connection, even if it was fleeting. I knew Tinder wasn't exactly a haven for deep, meaningful relationships, but I figured it was a decent way to meet new people, maybe get my mind off things. My profile was pretty basic. Some decent pictures, a funny bio, the usual. I swiped right on a bunch of guys, not really expecting much, and then I matched with him. His name was Liam. Liam was different from the other guys I'd matched with. His pictures weren't the typical gym selfies or posed vacation shots. They were candid, artistic, almost melancholic. One was a close-up of his hands playing a piano. Another was a silhouette of him, standing on a beach at sunset. He looked interesting. His bio was short and intriguing, looking for someone to explore the city with. I swiped right without thinking, and to my surprise, we matched instantly. We started chatting, and it was easy. He was witty, intelligent, and surprisingly insightful. He didn't bombard me with cheesy pickup lines or try to rush things. We talked about everything, our favorite books, our dreams, our fears. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, and I found myself drawn to him in a way I hadn't anticipated. After a week of nonstop texting, he suggested we meet up. I was hesitant. I'd been burned before, and the idea of putting myself out there again was terrifying. But Liam was so persistent, so charming, that I eventually caved. We agreed to meet for coffee at a small cafe downtown. The moment I saw him, I knew I was in trouble. He was even more attractive in person than in his pictures. He had this intense gaze that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We talked for hours that day, and I felt like I'd known him my whole life. We laughed, we shared secrets, and for the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely happy. We started seeing each other regularly after that. We went to museums, concerts, and late-night walks through the city. He introduced me to his friends, who were all equally quirky and interesting. I felt like I was finally finding my place, my tribe. Everything felt perfect. Too perfect, maybe. That's when the little things started happening. Small, almost unnoticeable things that I initially dismissed as coincidence or paranoia. I would get the feeling that I was being watched when I was alone, like there were eyes on me that I couldn't see. I would find things in my apartment slightly out of place. A book moved on the shelf, a drawer left ajar. I chalked it up to my own forgetfulness, but the feeling of unease persisted. Then there were the phone calls. I would get calls from unknown numbers, silent on the other end. When I tried to call back, the numbers were disconnected. It was creepy, but I didn't want to overreact. I didn't want to seem crazy. I told myself it was just stress, that I was letting my anxiety get the best of me. Liam was always so supportive, so understanding. He would tell me that everything was okay, that I was safe with him. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But then things took a turn for the worse. I started receiving strange messages on social media. Anonymous accounts sending me cryptic warnings. He's not who you think he is. Get out while you still can. You're in danger. I panicked. I showed Liam the messages, and he dismissed them as trolls, jealous exes, or just random internet weirdos. He told me to ignore them, to block the accounts, and to not let them get to me. I tried to follow his advice, but the messages kept coming, more frequent and more disturbing each time. One message in particular sent a chill down my spine. We tried to warn her too late. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I decided to do some digging, to find out more about Liam. I started with a simple Google search, but nothing came up. No social media profiles, no news articles, no trace of him online. It was like he didn't exist before he met me. That's when I got really scared. I confronted Liam about it, told him about the messages, the phone calls, the feeling of being watched. I told him I needed to know the truth, who he really was. He looked at me with those intense eyes of his, and for a moment, I thought he was going to tell me everything. But then he just smiled. A slow, chilling smile that didn't reach his eyes. He told me that I was being paranoid, that I was letting my imagination run wild. He said that he loved me, that he would never do anything to hurt me. I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't. The doubt had taken root, and it was growing stronger every day. One night, I decided to follow him. He told me he was going out to meet a friend, but something felt off. I waited until he left. Then I slipped out of my apartment and tailed him from a distance. He drove to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. I parked my car a few blocks away and crept closer, my heart pounding in my chest. I peered through a crack in the wall and saw him inside, surrounded by a group of people I didn't recognize. They were all wearing masks, and they were chanting something in a language I didn't understand. In the center of the group was a makeshift altar, and on the altar was a picture of me. I gasped, and one of the masked figures turned towards me. I didn't wait to see who it was. I turned and ran, as fast as my legs could carry me. I didn't stop running until I reached my apartment. I slammed the door shut, locked all the locks, and barricaded myself inside. I called the police, but they didn't believe me. They said I was hysterical, that there was no evidence of any crime. They told me to calm down, to get some rest, and to stop wasting their time. I was on my own. I knew I had to get out, to leave the city, to disappear, but I was too scared to move. I stayed locked inside my apartment for days, afraid to even peek out the window. The phone calls kept coming, the messages kept appearing, and the feeling of being watched grew stronger than ever. Then one night, I woke up to a noise in my apartment, a soft creaking sound that sent a shiver down my spine. I grabbed the knife I kept under my pillow and slowly crept out of bed. The noise was coming from the living room. I tiptoed towards the door, my heart pounding in my chest, and peeked inside. Liam was standing in the middle of the room, his back to me. He was wearing the same mask I had seen at the warehouse, and he was holding a knife in his hand. He turned around, and I saw his eyes. They were cold, empty, and devoid of any emotion. He didn't say a word. He just smiled. I screamed and lunged at him with my knife. We struggled, and the knife fell to the floor. He grabbed me and pinned me against the wall, his grip like iron. I fought back with all my strength, but he was too strong. He raised his knife and brought it down towards me. I closed my eyes and waited for the end, but it never came. There was a loud crash, and Liam fell to the floor. I opened my eyes and saw one of my neighbors standing in the doorway, holding a baseball bat. He had heard my screams and came to help. The police finally believed me this time. They arrested Liam and the other members of his cult. They found evidence of other victims, women who had disappeared without a trace. I was lucky to be alive. Liam is in prison now, but I still don't feel safe. I moved to a new city, changed my name, and cut off all contact with my old life. But the memories still haunt me. I still have nightmares about Liam, about the mask, about the warehouse. I still get the feeling that I'm being watched. I know that he'll never stop looking for me. And I know that one day, he'll find me. I regret swiping right every single day. It has caused so many memories, thoughts, and nightmares that will never go away. It will never be the same ever again. If I hadn't trusted my instincts that day, maybe I wouldn't be sitting here now, picking at the chipped nail polish on my thumb, replaying everything in my head like a broken record. It all started, like so many bad decisions, with Tinder. I was fresh out of a messy breakup, clinging to the single life like a life raft. My friends kept telling me to get back out there, and Tinder seemed like the easiest way to do it without actually having to do anything. Swipe, match, chat, low effort, potentially high reward. Or so I thought. His name was Alex, and his profile was intriguing. Not conventionally handsome, but interesting. Piercing blue eyes, a slightly crooked smile, and a bio that claimed he was a wanderer at heart with a penchant for obscure poetry and vintage records. Artsy, a little brooding, definitely my type. We matched, and the conversation flowed easily. He wasn't cheesy or pushy, and he actually seemed interested in what I had to say. We talked about books, music, our travel dreams, all the things that usually get glossed over in the initial Tinder dance. After a few days, he suggested we meet up. Coffee, casual, no pressure. Now here's where my instincts started buzzing. He wanted to meet at a coffee shop way outside of town, a place I'd never even heard of. It was a good 45-minute drive, and when I asked why he suggested that particular place, He just said he liked the atmosphere and the coffee was amazing. Alarm bells were faintly ringing, but I ignored them. I told myself I was being paranoid, that maybe he just had good taste in coffee. The day of the date, I almost canceled. I woke up with a knot in my stomach, a feeling of unease that I couldn't shake. My friend Sarah even texted me, saying she had a weird feeling about him and that I should stay home. But I'm stubborn, and I didn't want to seem like a flake. Plus, a small part of me was still excited to meet this mysterious Alex. The drive was uneventful, but as I got closer to the coffee shop, the landscape started to change. The suburban sprawl gave way to winding country roads, and the houses became more isolated, more dilapidated. The coffee shop itself was tucked away on a side street, almost hidden from view. It was a small, dimly lit place with mismatched furniture and an unsettlingly quiet atmosphere. Alex was already there, sitting at a table in the corner. He looked different in person, less polished, more intense. His eyes were even bluer than in his photos, and they seemed to bore right through me. He stood up when I walked in, gave me a quick hug, and then gestured for me to sit down. The conversation started out normal enough. We talked about our jobs, our hobbies, the usual getting-to-know-you stuff. But then the questions started to get a little personal. He asked about my family, my past relationships, my deepest fears. Again, alarm bells, but I chalked it up to him being deep and introspective. As we talked, I noticed that he kept glancing around the coffee shop, almost like he was looking for someone. He seemed nervous, agitated, and then he started talking about his project. He didn't go into specifics, but he said he was working on something big, something that would change the world. He talked about the importance of sacrifice and dedication, and he kept using phrases like the greater good and the chosen few. It sounded like something out of a cult movie. My anxiety was through the roof. I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to be rude. Plus, a tiny part of me was still intrigued, still wanted to know what this project was all about. So I stayed. Then, things took a turn for the worse. A woman walked into the coffee shop, a woman who looked vaguely familiar. Alex tensed up when he saw her, his eyes narrowing. He excused himself, saying he needed to take a call, and walked over to her. I watched as they talked, their voices low and hushed. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see the tension in their bodies. The woman looked angry, upset. Alex was trying to calm her down, but she wasn't having it. Suddenly, the woman slapped him across the face. Hard. Alex recoiled, his expression changing from calm to furious. He grabbed her arm, his grip tight. I saw the woman try to pull away, but he wouldn't let go. I knew I had to do something. I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest, and walked over to them. "Hey," I said, my voice trembling. "Is everything okay?" Alex turned to me, his eyes blazing with anger. "Everything's fine," he said, his voice tight. "Just a little misunderstanding." But the woman shook her head, her eyes pleading. "No, it's not fine," she said. "He's dangerous. You need to get away from him." Alex's grip tightened on her arm. "Don't listen to her," he said. "She's crazy." I didn't know what to do. I was frozen, paralyzed by fear. But then, something inside me snapped. I couldn't just stand there and watch this woman get hurt. I reached out and grabbed Alex's arm, trying to pull him away from her. "Let her go," I said, my voice shaking. He turned to me, his eyes filled with rage. "You don't understand," he said. "This is important. This is bigger than you." He shoved me away, sending me stumbling backward. I landed hard on the floor, hitting my head on a table. Everything went blurry. When I came to, the woman was gone. Alex was standing over me, his expression unreadable. "I told you to stay out of it," he said, his voice cold. He helped me up, but his touch was rough, almost violent. "I think you should go," he said. "This isn't your world." I didn't need to be told twice. I stumbled out of the coffee shop, my head spinning. I ran to my car, fumbling with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get them into the ignition. I drove away as fast as I could, not stopping until I was miles away, back in the safety of the city. I didn't look back. I called Sarah as soon as I got home, sobbing uncontrollably. I told her everything that had happened, every detail, every feeling of dread. She listened patiently, offering words of comfort and support. The next day, I went to the police. I told them about Alex, about the coffee shop, about the woman. They took my statement, but they didn't seem to take me seriously. They said there was no evidence of a crime, no way to track Alex down. They chalked it up to a bad day. But I knew it was more than that. I knew that Alex was dangerous, that he was involved in something sinister, and I knew that the woman was in trouble. I couldn't just let it go. I started doing my own research, digging into Alex's past, trying to find any information that could help me find him, find her. I scoured social media, online forums, anything I could get my hands on. I eventually found a small online community dedicated to exposing cults and extremist groups. I posted about Alex, about his project, about the coffee shop. To my surprise, someone recognized him. They said his real name was not Alex. They provided me with his real name and warned me. He was a known recruiter for a dangerous cult. The coffee shop was a meeting place, a place where they lured in new members. The project was a plan to commit a mass suicide, a sacrifice for the greater good. I was horrified. I had almost become one of them. And the woman, she must have been trying to escape, trying to warn me. I went back to the police with this new information. This time they listened. They launched an investigation, raiding the coffee shop, searching for Alex and the woman. They found nothing. The coffee shop was abandoned, stripped bare. Alex and the woman were gone, vanished without a trace. To this day, I don't know what happened to them. I don't know if the woman escaped, if she was forced to join the cult, if she's even still alive. I can only hope that she's safe, that she found a way out. I still think about Alex, about that day at the coffee shop. I replay everything in my head, wondering if I could have done something differently, if I could have saved her. I know I'll never forget her face, her pleading eyes, her desperate attempt to warn me. I learned a valuable lesson that day. Trust your instincts. They're usually right. And if something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't ignore those alarm bells. They could save your life. Or someone else's. Now, I try to live my life with open eyes, with a new perspective, that the world can be ugly. And now I listen to my gut. It hasn't failed me since. All right, so you're not going to believe this. Seriously, I still have trouble believing it myself, and it's been almost a year since it all went down. I'm not usually one for sharing super personal stuff, especially not the messed up kind, but I feel like I need to get this off my chest. Maybe someone else out there has experienced something similar and can tell me I'm not totally losing it. Anyway, buckle up because this is a wild ride. It all started, like so many questionable decisions, with Tinder. I was freshly single, bored out of my mind, and living in a new city where I didn't know anyone. Tinder seemed like the easiest way to meet people, even if it was mostly just for casual drinks or maybe a hookup or two. I wasn't expecting to find the love of my life, let's put it that way. I swiped through the usual suspects. Gym bros flexing in bathroom selfies, guys holding fish they just caught, and the occasional dude who seemed genuinely normal but had a bio that was either painfully generic or trying way too hard to be funny. Then I saw him. His name was Alex, and he was different. His photos weren't the typical stage shots. One was a candid photo of him laughing with friends at a music festival. Another was a close-up of his hands playing a guitar. He looked genuine, kind, and yeah, I'll admit it, really cute. His bio was simple. Musician, bookworm, and terrible at bios. Let's chat and see what happens. I swiped right, fully expecting him to be a catfish or some kind of player. But to my surprise, we matched almost instantly. We started chatting, and it was easy. He wasn't trying to be overly flirty or pushy. He just asked me about my day, my interests, and what brought me to the city. We talked about music, books, and our shared love of obscure documentaries. It felt like I had known him for years. After a week of texting, we decided to meet up for coffee. I was nervous, of course. Meeting someone from Tinder is always a gamble. But the moment I saw him waiting outside the coffee shop, I knew I was in trouble. He looked even better in person, and his smile was even more genuine than it seemed in his pictures. The coffee date turned into brunch, which turned into an afternoon exploring the city, which turned into dinner. We spent the entire day together, and it felt like we had been ripped out of some rom-com. I was completely smitten. Things moved fast after that. We started spending every weekend together. He'd come over to my tiny apartment. We'd cook dinner, watch movies, and just talk for hours. He introduced me to his friends, who were all equally cool and welcoming. It felt like I had finally found my place in this new city. After a month, he asked me to be his girlfriend. I didn't even hesitate. I said yes without a second thought. Everything felt so perfect, so right. I was genuinely happy for the first time in a long time. But that's when things started to get weird. It started subtly. He'd start showing up at my apartment unannounced, saying he was just in the neighborhood and wanted to say hi. At first, I didn't think much of it. I was happy to see him. But then it started happening more and more frequently, sometimes multiple times a day. He'd also start getting really jealous and possessive. He didn't like me going out with my friends without him. He'd constantly ask me where I was, who I was with, and what I was doing. He'd check my phone when I wasn't looking. It was suffocating. I tried to talk to him about it, but he'd just brush it off, saying he was just worried about me. He said he loved me so much and couldn't bear the thought of losing me. I wanted to believe him, but something felt off. Then came the gifts. At first, they were thoughtful and sweet. A book by my favorite author, a vinyl record of a band we both loved. But then they started getting strange. A framed photo of me sleeping. A lock of my hair he'd found on my pillow. A creepy antique doll he said reminded him of me. The doll was the last straw. I told him I needed some space. I said I couldn't handle the possessiveness and the strange gifts. He didn't take it well. He started crying, begging me not to leave him. He said he couldn't live without me. I stood my ground, told him I needed some time to think. I packed a bag and went to stay with my friend Sarah for a few days. I needed to clear my head and figure out what to do. While I was at Sarah's, Alex started blowing up my phone. Dozens of texts, voicemails, and missed calls. I ignored them all. I needed to disconnect. Then one night, Sarah and I were watching a movie when we heard a knock on the door. I peeked through the peephole and saw Alex standing there. He looked disheveled and desperate. I told Sarah not to open the door. I didn't want to talk to him, but he started banging on the door, yelling my name. He said he knew I was in there and that I couldn't hide from him forever. Sarah called the police. While we were waiting for them to arrive, Alex started smashing the windows of Sarah's car. He was completely out of control. The police finally arrived and arrested him. I filed a restraining order against him, and he was ordered to stay away from me. I thought it was finally over, but it wasn't. A few weeks later, I started getting anonymous phone calls. No one would say anything, but I could hear heavy breathing on the other end. I changed my number, but the calls kept coming. Then, I started noticing things were missing from my apartment. Small things, like a favorite mug or a scarf I loved. I knew someone was coming into my apartment when I wasn't there. I installed security cameras, hoping to catch whoever was breaking in. And I did. The footage showed Alex, wearing a disguise, creeping into my apartment in the middle of the night. He'd rummage through my things, sniff my clothes, and just stand there, staring at my bed. It was terrifying. I went back to the police with the footage, but they said there wasn't much they could do. He hadn't damaged anything or stolen anything of significant value. They said they couldn't arrest him without more evidence. I felt helpless. I was living in constant fear, knowing that he could be watching me at any time. I started having nightmares. I couldn't sleep. I was a wreck. Then one day, I got a package in the mail. It was a small, unmarked box. I hesitated to open it, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside the box was the antique doll he had given me, the one that creeped me out so much. But it was different. The doll's eyes had been gouged out, and stuffed inside the doll's mouth was a note. The note said, "If I can't have you, no one can." That's when I knew I was in real danger. I went to the police again, showed them the doll and the note. This time, they took me seriously. They launched a full-scale investigation and finally arrested Alex. They found a stash of photos and videos of me in his apartment, along with a detailed plan of how he was going to kidnap me. He had been stalking me for months, meticulously planning my abduction. He was charged with stalking, harassment, and attempted kidnapping. He's currently in jail, awaiting trial. I'm still terrified. I know he's obsessed with me, and I don't know what he'll do when he gets out of jail. I'm considering moving to another city, changing my name, and starting a new life. The whole experience has been traumatic. I'm still dealing with the emotional fallout. I have trust issues. I'm afraid of meeting new people. And it all started with a simple swipe on Tinder. So, yeah, you might not believe what happened to me, but it's all true. And it's a reminder that you never really know who you're talking to online. Be careful who you swipe right on. Your life might depend on it. I still can't believe everything happened, and sometimes I just don't trust anyone. After that whole Craigslist nightmare, I swore off the internet for anything even remotely related to finding a place to live or a job, or really, anything involving strangers. I spent a few months just trying to get my head on straight, working at the grocery store, saving up a little money, and going to therapy to deal with the whole almost got murdered by a crazy old lady thing. It was a process. Eventually, though, I started to feel like maybe, just maybe, I could dip my toes back into the dating pool. My therapist said it was important to not let one bad experience ruin everything, and honestly, I was lonely. The grocery store wasn't exactly a hotbed of romance. So, against my better judgment, I re-downloaded Tinder. I figured, at least I could swipe from the safety of my own apartment, right? I updated my profile, added some new pictures, carefully curated to show I was fun and approachable, but definitely not desperate, and started swiping. It was the same old Tinder game. Endless scrolling, judging people based on blurry pictures and witty bios, and hoping for a match. Most of the guys were forgettable, the same generic profiles over and over again. But then I matched with him. Liam. His profile was different. Not in a creepy, scratching in the walls kind of way, but just more interesting. He had a couple of photos of himself hiking, one of him playing guitar, and another of him volunteering at an animal shelter. He seemed outdoorsy, artistic, and compassionate. Exactly the kind of guy I thought I wanted to meet. His bio was simple. Looking for someone to share adventures with. I liked that. It wasn't a hookup line. Wasn't he trying too hard? Just a straightforward invitation. We started chatting, and things clicked right away. He was funny, intelligent, and genuinely seemed interested in getting to know me. We talked about our hobbies, our favorite books, our dreams for the future. He was a writer, working on his first novel. I was impressed. I'd always had a soft spot for creative types. We messaged each other for hours every day, and soon, I found myself actually looking forward to opening the app. He made me laugh, made me think, made me feel hopeful. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. After a week or so of chatting, he suggested we meet up. I was hesitant, of course. The Craigslist thing was still fresh in my mind, and the idea of meeting a stranger from the internet terrified me. But Liam was different. He wasn't pushy. He was understanding, and he made me feel safe. We talked on the phone a couple of times before agreeing to meet. Hearing his voice made me feel better and more comfortable. We decided to meet for coffee at a cafe in a busy part of town, somewhere public and well-lit. I told my friend Sarah all about him and sent her his picture. I made sure she knew where I was going and when I expected to be back. I even shared my location with her on my phone. I was determined to be as safe as possible. When I met him, he was even better in person than he was online. He was tall, with kind eyes and a warm smile. He dressed casually and was very easy to talk to. He smelled good too. We talked for hours that first day, about everything and nothing. It felt like we had known each other forever. We laughed a lot, and I felt this genuine connection with him. He was exactly what I had been looking for. We started dating, and it was amazing. He took me on hikes. We went to art museums. We saw live music. He introduced me to his friends, and I introduced him to mine. He was kind, thoughtful, and supportive. He treated me with respect and made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. I was falling hard, and I didn't care. It felt so good to be happy again. After a few months, things started to get weird. Subtle things at first, things I could easily dismiss as my imagination or paranoia. He started asking me more personal questions about my past, about my family, about my fears. He wanted to know everything, down to the smallest detail. I didn't think much of it at the time. I figured he was just trying to get to know me better. He was always asking me about the Craigslist incident. What did I think of it? What did I do? What do I think I should have done? Then he started showing up at places I hadn't told him I was going. I'd be at the grocery store, and he'd be there, browsing the same aisle. Or I'd be at my friend's house, and he'd just randomly drop by. He said it was just a coincidence, that he happened to be in the neighborhood. But it happened too often to be a coincidence. I felt like I was being watched, like he was always one step ahead of me. I started trying to avoid some of the places I would regularly go to. He made a comment about it one night on one of our dates. He asked why I was avoiding him. I laughed nervously and made an excuse, but I could feel him staring at me. He also started becoming more controlling. He wanted to know where I was all the time, who I was with, what I was doing. He would text me constantly, and if I didn't respond right away, he'd get angry. He started isolating me from my friends, telling me they were bad influences and that he was the only one I could trust. He would make me feel guilty for spending time with them, and eventually, I started seeing them less and less. One night, I was at his apartment, and I went to use the bathroom. I saw his laptop was open on his desk. I wasn't trying to snoop, but I couldn't help but notice that he had a Tinder profile open. He claimed he had deleted Tinder when we started dating. I felt a knot of dread form in my stomach. I tried to convince myself it was an old profile, that he just hadn't gotten around to deleting it yet. But something told me that wasn't the case. I waited until he was in the shower, and then I went back to his laptop. I know I shouldn't have, but I couldn't resist. I had to know. I opened the Tinder app and saw that it was active, with recent messages. I scrolled through his conversations, and my blood ran cold. He was talking to other women, saying the same things he had said to me when we first started dating. He was telling them he was looking for someone to share adventures with, someone to connect with. I felt sick to my stomach. I couldn't believe he had been lying to me the whole time. I felt so stupid, so naive. As I was scrolling through his messages, I noticed something else. One of the women he was talking to had a profile picture that looked familiar. I clicked on her profile and saw that it was Sarah, my best friend. He was talking to Sarah, pretending to be someone else, trying to get her to go out with him. He knew she was my friend. He knew everything about me. He had been manipulating me from the start. I don't know how long they had been talking, but my stomach dropped when I saw that he had gotten her to agree to go out with him. The shower turned off, and I heard Liam's footsteps approaching. I quickly closed the laptop and ran back to the couch, pretending to read a book. He came out of the bathroom, looking refreshed and happy. He smiled at me, and I felt a wave of disgust wash over me. How could he be so charming, so loving, while at the same time betraying me so completely? "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. "You seem a little pale." I forced a smile. "Yeah, just a little tired," I said. "I think I should probably head home." He looked disappointed. Are you sure? I was hoping we could watch a movie together." "Maybe another time," I said. "I really need to get some rest." I gathered my things and walked to the door. He followed me, his eyes filled with concern. "I'll walk you to your car," he said. As we walked to my car, I felt his eyes on me, watching my every move. I unlocked my car, got in, and started the engine. "I'll call you tomorrow," he said, leaning in for a kiss. I turned my head, avoiding his lips. "Maybe," I said. "I'll be busy." I drove home, my mind racing. I couldn't believe what had just happened. I had been so blind, so trusting. I had let him into my life, into my heart, and he had used that trust against me. I felt betrayed, hurt, and angry. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let him get away with this. I had to warn Sarah, and I had to get him out of my life for good. I waited until I got home to text Sarah about what I found. The next day, I went to see Sarah. I told her everything, about his Tinder profile, about the messages I had seen, about how he had been manipulating me and isolating me from my friends. Sarah was shocked and horrified. She couldn't believe that Liam, the man she had thought was so kind and caring, was actually a manipulative liar. She was angry. We went to the police. I changed my number and moved again. I was so relieved when I heard that he had been caught. After it all happened, I found it hard to trust anyone, especially men. I am still having trouble with it to this day. I never thought this would happen to me, but here I am, convinced that Tinder almost ruined my life. And I'm not talking about the usual dating app horror stories, the bad dates, the ghosting, the awkward hookups. This was something else entirely. It started, innocently enough, with a right swipe. His name was Alex, and his profile was, well, let's just say he knew how to take a good picture. He had that boy next door look going on, all charming smiles and disheveled hair. His bio was short and sweet, looking for someone to explore the city with. I was new to the city, fresh out of college, and feeling incredibly alone, so I swiped right. We matched instantly. Our conversation started like any other Tinder interaction, small talk about our jobs, hobbies, and what we were looking for. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, which was a refreshing change from the usual superficial exchanges. He asked about my move, my new job, and my family. He even remembered details from previous conversations, which made me feel like he was actually listening. After a few days of chatting, He suggested we meet up for coffee. I was hesitant at first. I'd had my fair share of disappointing Tinder dates, and I was starting to feel jaded about the whole online dating thing. But there was something about Alex that felt different. He seemed genuine, kind, and normal. So I agreed. We met at a small coffee shop downtown. He was even more attractive in person. He had this disarming smile and a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. We talked for hours that day, about everything and nothing. He told me about his passion for photography, his dreams of traveling the world, and his close-knit family. I found myself completely drawn to him. He seemed like the perfect guy. We started seeing each other regularly after that. We went to museums, explored new restaurants, and took long walks in the park. He was always attentive, thoughtful, and incredibly romantic. It felt like a fairy tale. After a few weeks, he started opening up about his past. He told me about a difficult childhood, a strained relationship with his father, and a past relationship that ended badly. He portrayed himself as a victim, someone who had been hurt and betrayed. I felt a deep sense of empathy for him. I wanted to be the one to heal his wounds, to show him that he was worthy of love and happiness. He became increasingly reliant on me, constantly seeking my reassurance and validation. At first, I didn't mind. I liked feeling needed, like I was making a difference in someone's life. But then, his neediness started to become overwhelming. He would text me constantly throughout the day, demanding to know where I was and what I was doing. He would get jealous if I spent time with my friends or family. He wanted all of my attention, all of the time. I started to feel suffocated. I tried to talk to him about it, to explain that I needed space and that his constant need for validation was draining me. But he wouldn't listen. He would get angry, accusing me of not caring about him and of abandoning him like everyone else had. I found myself walking on eggshells around him, afraid of triggering his anger. The more I tried to distance myself, the more he clung to me. He would show up unannounced at my apartment, wait for me outside my work, and bombard me with calls and texts. He started making veiled threats, hinting that he couldn't live without me and that he would do anything to keep me in his life. That's when I started to get scared. I realized that Alex wasn't just needy. He was obsessive. His love wasn't a sign of affection. It was a form of control. I knew I had to get out, but I didn't know how. He had isolated me from my friends and family, and I was afraid of what he would do if I tried to leave. One evening, I was at my apartment when I heard a knock on the door. It was Alex. I didn't answer. He started banging on the door, yelling my name, demanding that I let him in. I was terrified. I called the police. When the police arrived, Alex was gone. They took my statement and advised me to file a restraining order. I did, but that didn't stop him. He started harassing me through anonymous phone calls and emails. He would leave disturbing messages on my voicemail, telling me that he was watching me and that he would never let me go. He started stalking me. I would see him lurking in the shadows outside my apartment building, following me when I went to work, and appearing at places I frequented. I felt like I was constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for him to make his next move. I was living in a state of constant fear. I knew I couldn't continue living like this. I decided to move. I packed up my belongings and left the city without telling anyone, not even my family. I changed my phone number, deleted my social media accounts, and started a new life in a new place. It took me a long time to recover from the trauma. I struggled with anxiety and depression. I had nightmares about Alex. I was afraid to trust anyone. But eventually, with the help of therapy and the support of my loved ones, I started to heal. I learned to set boundaries, to recognize red flags, and to trust my instincts. I also learned a valuable lesson about the dangers of online dating. While Tinder can be a fun and convenient way to meet people, it can also be a breeding ground for predators. It's important to be cautious, to do your research, and to trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. I still use dating apps occasionally, but I'm much more careful now. I always meet in public places. I tell a friend or family member where I'm going, and I never give out too much personal information too soon. I never thought this would happen to me, but it did, and it changed my life forever. I hope my story serves as a warning to others, a reminder to be careful and to prioritize your safety above all else. Because in the world of online dating, you never really know who's on the other side of that screen. It is so important to recognize red flags and to trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Always prioritize your safety and well-being, And never be afraid to walk away from a situation that makes you uncomfortable. Dating apps can be a great way to meet new people, but it's important to remember that they're also a tool that can be used by predators. Be cautious, be aware, and be safe. It's better to be safe than sorry. Sitting in a dingy motel room miles from anywhere, wondering how my life went so spectacularly off the rails thanks to a dating app and a bad case of loneliness. It all started, innocently enough, with a Tinder notification. After my divorce, I told myself I'd never go back to the dating scene. Years of stale marriage and simmering resentment had soured me on the whole idea of romance. But the silence in my apartment was deafening, and the endless stream of cat videos on YouTube just wasn't cutting it. So, I begrudgingly downloaded Tinder. I wasn't looking for anything serious. A few casual dates, maybe some light flirting, just something to remind myself that I wasn't completely invisible. My profile was honest, if a little self-deprecating. Recent divorcee, enjoys hiking, bad puns, and existential dread. Surprisingly, I got a few matches. Most of them with a typical parade of shirtless gym selfies and generic pickup lines. But then there was Ethan. Ethan's profile stood out. He wasn't conventionally attractive, but he had this kind, intelligent look in his eyes that I found strangely appealing. His bio was simple. Lover of books, dogs, and good conversation. Looking for someone to share adventures with. We matched, and I decided to bite the bullet and message him. The conversations flowed easily from the start. We talked about everything, our favorite books, our families, our hopes and fears. He seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say, and I found myself looking forward to his messages. After a week of chatting, we decided to meet for coffee. The coffee date went surprisingly well. Ethan was even more charming in person. He was a great listener, and he had a quick wit that kept me laughing. We talked for hours, and I felt a connection with him that I hadn't felt with anyone in years. By the end of the date, I was actually excited about the prospect of seeing him again. We went on a few more dates over the next few weeks. We went to the movies, took a hike in the mountains, and even had a picnic in the park. Each date was better than the last, and I found myself falling for him. He was kind, considerate, and genuinely seemed to care about me. I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could find happiness again. Then came the trip. Ethan had this grand idea. He loved hiking. He proposed we drive out to this remote mountain range for a long weekend of hiking and camping. It sounded idyllic. A chance to escape the city, reconnect with nature, and spend some quality time with the man I was starting to fall for. I hesitated at first. It felt like a big step, especially considering how recently I'd been divorced. But Ethan was so persuasive, and the idea of spending a few days alone with him in the wilderness was too tempting to resist. I packed my bags, grabbed my hiking boots, and met Ethan early Friday morning. He was waiting for me in his beat-up Subaru, a huge grin on his face. The drive was long, but we kept ourselves entertained with music and conversation. As we got further away from the city, the landscape began to change. The rolling hills gave way to towering mountains, and the air grew crisp and clean. I felt a sense of excitement building within me. We arrived at the trailhead in the late afternoon. Ethan parked the car, and we started unloading our gear. He seemed a little too eager, a little too insistent on carrying the heavier items. I brushed it off. He was probably just trying to be helpful. The hike was challenging, but the scenery was breathtaking. We hiked for several hours, climbing higher and higher into the mountains. As the sun began to set, we reached a secluded clearing where Ethan had planned for us to set up camp. We pitched our tent, started a fire, and cooked dinner. The night sky was incredible. Millions of stars twinkled above us, and the silence was broken only by the crackling of the fire. After dinner, we sat by the fire, talking and laughing. Ethan seemed different. He was more intense, more focused on me. He kept complimenting me, telling me how beautiful I was, how happy he was to be with me. It felt good to be desired, but something about his intensity made me uneasy. That night, as we lay in the tent, I couldn't sleep. The feeling of unease had grown stronger. I kept hearing noises outside the tent, rustling in the bushes, snapping twigs. I told myself it was just animals, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I finally drifted off to sleep, but my slumber was restless. I had a series of disturbing dreams. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding. Ethan was asleep next to me, his breathing deep and regular. I tried to calm myself, but the feeling of dread persisted. The next morning, things took a turn for the worse. We were eating breakfast when Ethan suggested we go for a hike to a nearby waterfall. I hesitated. I was still feeling shaken from the night before, and I didn't really feel like hiking. But Ethan insisted. He said it was a short, easy hike, and that the waterfall was worth seeing. I reluctantly agreed. As we hiked, the trail grew narrower and more treacherous. The waterfall was further away than Ethan had led me to believe, and I started to regret agreeing to come. We reached a point where the trail was barely a foot wide, with a steep drop-off on one side. I froze, my legs trembling. I couldn't go any further. "Ethan, I can't do this," I said, my voice shaking. "It's too dangerous." Ethan turned to me, his eyes blazing. "Don't be ridiculous," he said. "It's just a little further. Don't you trust me?" I looked into his eyes, and I saw something that terrified me. It wasn't kindness or affection. It was something dark, something sinister. I realized that I didn't trust him. Not at all. "No," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't trust you." Ethan's expression hardened. "You should," he said, "because I'm the only one who can protect you now." He grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "Come on," he said, pulling me forward. "We're almost there." I struggled against him, but he was too strong. He dragged me along the narrow trail, closer and closer to the edge. I screamed, but no one could hear me. We were miles from civilization, alone in the wilderness. I don't know what happened next. One minute I was fighting Ethan, the next I was falling. The ground seemed to rush up to meet me. I hit something hard, and everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed, my body aching. A doctor told me that I had been found unconscious at the bottom of a ravine. I had suffered a concussion, a broken leg, and several other injuries. I was lucky to be alive. The police investigated, but they couldn't find Ethan. He had disappeared without a trace. They suspected foul play, but they had no evidence to prove anything. The case went cold. After I recovered from my injuries, I tried to put the whole ordeal behind me, but it was impossible. The memory of Ethan's eyes, the feeling of falling, haunted me day and night. I knew that I had narrowly escaped something terrible, but I didn't know what. I started doing some research on Ethan. I scoured the internet, searching for any information about him. I found nothing. It was as if he didn't exist. But then, I stumbled across a news article about a series of missing women who had disappeared while hiking in the same mountain range where I had been attacked. The article mentioned that all the women had met their attackers on dating apps. A chill ran down my spine. I realized that Ethan wasn't who he had said he was. He was a predator, a psychopath who used dating apps to lure women into the wilderness, and then, I didn't want to think about what he did to them. I went to the police with my findings, but they said they couldn't do anything without more evidence. They told me that Ethan was probably long gone, that he had probably moved on to another state, another country, but I couldn't let it go. I knew that Ethan was still out there, preying on unsuspecting women. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I started tracking his digital footprint, searching for any clues that might lead me to him. It was a long, arduous process, but I was determined to bring him to justice. That's how I ended up in this dingy motel room, miles from anywhere. I had finally found a lead, a burner phone that Ethan had been using to communicate with his victims. I had traced the phone to this small town, and I was here to find him. I don't know what I'm going to do when I find him. I'm not a violent person, but I know that I can't let him continue to hurt people. I have to stop him. I never thought this would happen to me. I never thought that a dating app could lead me to such a dark place. But here I am, ready to face my fears and confront the man who almost destroyed my life. I just hope I'm strong enough to do what needs to be done. I just hope I survive. I never imagined I'd be telling this story, not because it's unbelievably outlandish or filled with dramatic twists worthy of a Hollywood script. No, it's horrifying precisely because it's so ordinary, so easily overlooked, and yet so deeply unsettling. It all started with Tinder. I know. Roll your eyes. Another Tinder horror story. But hear me out, because this one got under my skin in a way I can't quite explain. I was in my late 20s, recently out of a long-term relationship, and feeling that familiar mix of loneliness and the desperate need to prove to myself that I was still desirable. Tinder seemed like the obvious solution, a quick and easy way to fill the void and maybe even find something interesting. I swiped with a carefree abandon, judging faces and bios with a ruthless efficiency I wasn't particularly proud of. Then I matched with him. His name was Alex, and his profile was unremarkable. A few blurry photos, one of him hiking, one of him with a dog, and another of him awkwardly smiling into the camera. His bio was equally bland, just looking for someone to explore the city with. Nothing stood out, nothing screamed red flag. He was just average, and maybe that's why I swiped right. I was tired of the overly curated profiles, the guys trying too hard to be cool or interesting. Alex seemed genuine, like someone you might actually run into in real life. We started chatting, and the conversation was surprisingly easy. He asked about my interests, my job, my favorite restaurants. He listened attentively, responding thoughtfully, and actually seemed interested in what I had to say. It was refreshing, especially compared to the usual Tinder encounters. After a few days of chatting, we decided to meet up for coffee. He suggested a small, independent cafe near my apartment. It was a weekday afternoon, so the place wasn't too crowded. He was exactly as he appeared in his photos, average. Average height, average build, average face. He wasn't unattractive, but he wasn't exactly going to turn any heads either. But his personality was nice. He was polite, engaging, and genuinely seemed interested in getting to know me. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and I found myself laughing more than I had in months. By the end of the date, I was actually hopeful. Maybe this could be something real. We went on a few more dates over the next few weeks. We explored the city, tried new restaurants, and even went to a concert. Alex was always a perfect gentleman, respectful, attentive, and considerate. He never pressured me for anything, and always made sure I was comfortable. I started to let my guard down, to trust him. I told him about my past relationship, my insecurities, my dreams. He listened patiently, offering words of encouragement and support. I felt like I could be myself around him, like he truly understood me. That's when things started to get weird. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. He would make small comments that just didn't quite sit right with me. He'd mention things I had told him in passing, things that seemed insignificant at the time, but that he remembered with unnerving detail. He'd ask probing questions about my friends and family, about my routines and habits. At first, I brushed it off as him just being interested in getting to know me better. But the questions became more frequent, more specific, more invasive. He started showing up at places I hadn't told him I would be. He'd happen to be at the same grocery store, the same coffee shop, the same park. He'd always have a plausible explanation, a reasonable excuse. But the coincidences piled up, becoming too frequent to ignore. I started to feel like I was being watched. I'd catch glimpses of him in the corner of my eye, lurking in the shadows, observing me from a distance. I'd hear his voice in crowded places, whispering my name, even when I knew he wasn't there. I started to feel paranoid, like I was losing my mind. I tried to talk to him about it, but he dismissed my concerns, telling me I was being irrational, that I was imagining things. He'd reassure me that he was just trying to be a good boyfriend, that he cared about me and wanted to be involved in my life. I wanted to believe him, but the feeling of unease persisted. One night, I woke up to find him standing in my bedroom, staring at me. The room was dark, and I couldn't see his face clearly, but I could feel his eyes on me. I screamed, and he quickly backed away, apologizing profusely. He claimed he had just been checking on me, that he had heard a noise and wanted to make sure I was safe. I was terrified, but I didn't want to overreact. I told him to leave, and he reluctantly agreed. But after that night, things escalated quickly. He started calling me incessantly, sending me dozens of texts and emails every day. He'd show up unannounced at my work, waiting for me outside my office. He'd follow me home, walking a few steps behind, never saying a word. I started to feel trapped, like I was being suffocated. I knew I had to end it, but I was afraid of what he might do. I tried to break up with him over the phone, but he refused to accept it. He insisted that we talk in person, that he could fix things, that he couldn't live without me. I reluctantly agreed to meet him one last time, in a public place, during the day. I chose a busy park, hoping that the crowds would deter him from doing anything drastic. When I arrived, he was already there, waiting for me on a bench. He looked disheveled, his eyes bloodshot, his clothes rumpled. He started pleading with me, begging me to give him another chance. He promised to change, to be a better boyfriend, to do whatever it took to make me happy. I tried to reason with him, to explain that it was over, that I couldn't be with someone I didn't trust. But he wouldn't listen. He became increasingly agitated, his voice rising, his hands shaking. He started accusing me of lying, of cheating, of leading him on. I tried to leave, but he grabbed my arm, refusing to let me go. He started yelling, attracting the attention of other people in the park. I was terrified, but I tried to remain calm. I told him to let go of me, that he was scaring me. He refused. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a knife. Everything went silent. The sounds of the park faded away, and all I could hear was the pounding of my heart. He pointed the knife at me, his eyes filled with rage and desperation. He told me that if he couldn't have me, no one could. I was frozen with fear, unable to move or speak. I thought I was going to die. But then something unexpected happened. A group of people, who had been watching the scene unfold, intervened. They rushed towards us, tackling him to the ground, disarming him. I managed to break free and run away, not stopping until I reached the safety of my apartment. I called the police, and they arrested him. He was charged with assault and stalking, and eventually convicted. I testified against him in court, recounting the events of the past few months. It was a difficult and traumatic experience, but I knew I had to do it, not just for myself, but for other women who might be in a similar situation. After the trial, I tried to move on with my life. I went to therapy, cut off contact with everyone who reminded me of him, and focused on rebuilding my sense of self-worth. It was a long and arduous process, but eventually, I started to heal. I learned to trust my instincts, to set boundaries, and to prioritize my own safety and well-being. I also learned that even the most ordinary people can be capable of extraordinary darkness, and that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones hiding in plain sight. Tinder is a place of fleeting connections and curated personas, where reality can easily be distorted and danger can lurk beneath the surface of a seemingly innocuous profile. My story is a reminder to be cautious, to be vigilant, and to never underestimate the potential for things to go wrong. Because sometimes, the swipe that seems so harmless can lead to a nightmare you never imagined possible. And I still jump every time my phone buzzes with a notification. Okay, buckle up, because this is a story I still can't believe is actually mine. It's a Tinder tale gone terribly wrong, a cautionary story about trusting profile pics and witty banter over common sense. I swear, I'm still trying to piece together how I let things get as far as they did. I was freshly single, reeling from a pretty brutal breakup, and my friends were all pushing me to get back out there. Of course, getting back out there in the 21st century meant downloading Tinder. I'd always been skeptical. Dating apps felt so artificial. But honestly, I was lonely and wanted a distraction. So, I created a profile, carefully selecting pictures that made me look reasonably attractive without screaming desperate. Wrote a bio that was equal parts funny and self-deprecating, and started swiping. For the most part, it was the usual Tinder experience. Endless streams of generic profiles, awkward conversations, and the occasional super like from someone who was clearly not my type. Then I matched with him. Liam. His profile was intriguing. Moody black and white photos, artistic shots of urban landscapes, and a bio that quoted some obscure poet I'd actually read in college. He seemed intelligent, creative, and definitely not like the typical swipe right wanna hang kind of guy. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. He was witty, engaging, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked about everything: books, movies, music, our hopes, our fears. He even managed to make me laugh about the breakup, which I didn't think was possible at that point. After a week of almost constant messaging, he suggested we meet up. I was hesitant. I'd had my fair share of Tinder duds, and I was nervous about being disappointed again. But Liam was persistent, and I had to admit, I was really drawn to him. Plus, my friends kept chanting, "Just do it," with the enthusiasm of a Nike commercial. So I agreed. He suggested a small, independent bookstore cafe in a part of the city I wasn't super familiar with. It sounded charming and low-key, perfect for a first date. I told a couple of friends where I was going and what time I expected to be back. You know, the usual safety precautions. The day of the date, I was a nervous wreck. I spent hours agonizing over what to wear, rereading our conversations, and mentally preparing myself for any possible scenario. When I finally arrived at the cafe, I was a sweaty, jittery mess. He was already there, sitting at a table in the corner, and he looked nothing like his pictures. I mean, he was still attractive, in a brooding, intense kind of way, but his photos had clearly been strategically angled and filtered to hide certain imperfections. He was older than I had initially thought. His face was more weathered, and he had this unsettling intensity in his eyes that I hadn't picked up on in the photos. But I'd already committed. I took a deep breath, plastered on a smile, and went over to introduce myself. The first hour was awkward. He was quiet, almost withdrawn, and didn't seem nearly as engaging as he had been online. He mostly asked questions about me, listening intently but offering little in return. It felt like an interrogation rather than a conversation. As the date progressed, he started to open up a bit, but his stories were strange. He talked about his fascination with true crime, his obsession with unsolved mysteries, and his belief that the world was full of hidden conspiracies. He spoke with such fervor that it was hard to tell if he was joking or completely serious. Then, he started asking about my apartment, not in a casual, "So, where do you live?" kind of way. He wanted specifics: what floor I was on, how many windows I had, what kind of security system I had, which, by the way, was none. He asked if I lived alone, if I had any roommates, if I had any pets. I started to feel really uncomfortable. My gut was screaming at me to end the date and get out of there, but I didn't want to be rude. Plus, a small part of me still held onto the hope that this was just a weird first impression, and he'd eventually relax and be the charming guy I'd been talking to online. Big mistake. After the cafe, he suggested we go for a walk. Again, I hesitated. It was getting dark, and I was definitely not feeling the date. But he was so insistent, and I was so determined to be polite, that I reluctantly agreed. We walked through the dimly lit streets, and he continued his rambling monologues about crime and conspiracy. He started talking about how easy it was to disappear in the city, how many people went missing every year without a trace, and how the police were too incompetent to solve most cases. The conversation took a darker and more personal turn. He started asking about my past, about the breakup I'd mentioned in our chats. He pried into the details, wanting to know everything: what went wrong, who was at fault, how I was coping. I felt increasingly vulnerable and exposed. I tried to deflect, to change the subject, but he wouldn't let it go. He kept pressing, digging deeper, until I felt like I was reliving the entire breakup right there on the street. Then, he stopped walking and turned to face me. The street was deserted, the only light coming from a flickering street lamp. His eyes were intense, almost manic. He said, "You know, it's funny how people think they can just walk away from things, that they can just erase the past and start over. But the past always catches up, doesn't it?" His words were so loaded, so threatening, that I felt a surge of pure terror. I knew, in that moment, that I had made a terrible mistake. This wasn't just a bad date. This was something far more dangerous. I stammered, "I think I should go." He didn't say anything. He just stared at me, his eyes unblinking. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy, until I couldn't take it anymore. I turned and ran. I ran as fast as I could, not knowing where I was going, just wanted to get away from him. I could hear his footsteps behind me, but I didn't dare look back. I ran until I reached a busy street, filled with people and bright lights. I ducked into a crowded bar, my heart pounding, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I looked back, but he wasn't there. I stayed in that bar for hours, too terrified to leave. I called my friends, told them everything that had happened, and begged them to come pick me up. The next few weeks were a blur of paranoia and anxiety. I changed my locks, installed a security system, and slept with a knife under my pillow. I deleted my Tinder profile and scrubbed my social media clean. I felt like I was being watched, followed, haunted by the memory of his intense gaze. I never saw Liam again, but the experience left a lasting scar. I'm still wary of online dating, still haunted by the realization that someone you meet through a seemingly harmless app can turn out to be your worst nightmare. I learned a hard lesson about trusting my instincts, about not being afraid to be rude, and about the importance of prioritizing my safety above all else. And I definitely learned to take Tinder profiles with a massive grain of salt, because behind that carefully curated image and witty bio, there might be someone far more dangerous than you could ever imagine. It makes me wonder who I would ever talk to again in my life. It was something that I could never overcome. I'll never forget the feeling of dread when I realized I had matched with my high school bully on Tinder. Okay, rewind a bit. I'm not exactly someone who thrives on dating apps. I'm more of a meet-cute at the bookstore type of romantic, even though that's never actually happened to me. But after a particularly brutal breakup, my friends convinced me to download Tinder, promising it would be a fun distraction and a confidence booster. I reluctantly agreed, figuring it couldn't hurt. I set up a profile with some semi-flattering photos, wrote a witty bio about my love for bad puns and obscure indie films, and braced myself for the swiping onslaught. The first few days were uneventful. Lots of generic hey messages, some guys who were clearly using outdated photos, and a few who seemed genuinely nice, but just didn't spark my interest. I was starting to think my friends were wrong, and Tinder was just a soul-crushing wasteland of disappointment. Then I saw his profile. His name was Mark, and his pictures were, well, they were good. He had that effortlessly cool look, the kind that always seemed to attract attention in high school. He was smirking in one photo, laughing with friends in another, and gazing thoughtfully into the distance in a third. Classic Tinder fare, but he was undeniably attractive. But it wasn't the pictures that made my stomach drop. It was the name. Mark. That name echoed with years of buried memories, of whispered insults and cruel pranks. Mark was Mark Thompson, the bane of my existence in high school. He was the quarterback of the football team, the king of the popular kids, and unfortunately for me, he had decided I was his personal punching bag. I wasn't exactly a social butterfly back then. I was awkward, bookish, and definitely not part of the in crowd. Mark and his friends seemed to take great pleasure in making my life miserable. They'd trip me in the hallways, make fun of my clothes, and leave nasty notes in my locker. The worst part was the nicknames. Bookworm, Four Eyes, Freak. They were relentless, and their words chipped away at my self-esteem, leaving me feeling small and worthless. I had tried to ignore them, to rise above their petty cruelty, but it was hard. High school is a pressure cooker, and their constant harassment made me feel like I was drowning. I eventually learned to avoid them, to take different routes to class, to hide in the library during lunch. But the fear never really went away. And now, here he was, years later, on Tinder. My first instinct was to swipe left, to banish him from my digital world and pretend I never saw him. But something stopped me. Maybe it was morbid curiosity. Maybe it was a twisted desire for revenge, or maybe it was just plain stupidity. Whatever the reason, I hesitated, my finger hovering over the screen. His bio was short and to the point. Just looking for good vibes and good times. Good vibes. Good times? That was rich, coming from him. Against my better judgment, I swiped right. It's a match. Notification popped up almost instantly. My heart sank. He messaged me almost immediately. Hey, you look familiar. I stared at the message, my mind racing. What should I say? Should I pretend I didn't know him? Should I confront him about his past behavior? Should I just unmatch him and run for the hills? I typed and deleted several responses before finally settling on something vague. Maybe we went to the same school. Yeah, that's it. Were you at Northwood High? My stomach twisted. Yeah, I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. A long time ago. Wow, small world. I'm Mark. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. I know. I typed back. There was a pause, and I wondered if he was starting to remember me. Maybe he was regretting his past actions. Maybe he was about to apologize. Instead, he wrote, "You look different. In a good way." Different? In a good way? Was he serious? After all the years of making me feel like I was the ugliest, most worthless person in the world, he was now telling me I looked good. The hypocrisy was infuriating. I decided to call him out. Do you remember me, Mark? Do you remember calling me bookworm and tripping me in the hallways? Another pause. This time, it was longer, more pregnant with tension. Finally, he responded. Honestly, no. High school was a long time ago. I don't really remember much. I scoffed. That's convenient. I typed back, my fingers trembling with anger. So you just conveniently forgot all the terrible things you did? Hey, look, he wrote. I'm not saying I was perfect back then. I probably did some stupid stuff. But I've changed. I'm not that person anymore. Oh, really? I replied. How have you changed? Did you suddenly develop a conscience? I don't know, he wrote. I grew up. I realized that being a jerk isn't cool. I didn't believe him. I didn't believe that he had genuinely changed, that he was truly remorseful for his past actions. He was probably just saying what he thought I wanted to hear, hoping to get a date. But a small part of me, a tiny, almost imperceptible part, wondered if he was telling the truth. People do change, after all. Maybe he had learned from his mistakes. Maybe he was genuinely trying to be a better person. I decided to give him a chance. A small chance. A very, very small chance. Okay, I wrote. Let's say I believe you. What do you want from me, Mark? I just wanted to apologize, he wrote, for being a jerk in high school. I'm really sorry. I know it doesn't make up for what I did, but I hope you can forgive me. I stared at the message, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Anger, resentment, disbelief, and yes, maybe a tiny bit of hope. Apology accepted. I typed back, surprising myself. But that doesn't mean I'm going to go on a date with you. I didn't expect you to, he wrote. I just wanted to say sorry. We chatted for a little while longer, mostly about mundane things, our jobs, our hobbies, our favorite restaurants. He seemed normal, almost charming even, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was talking to a completely different person, someone who bore no resemblance to the Mark Thompson I knew in high school. Eventually, I said goodnight and closed the app. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind still racing. Had I made the right decision? Had I been too forgiving? Too naive? The next day, I received another message from Mark. Hey, I was wondering if you'd be interested in grabbing coffee sometime. Just as friends. No pressure. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say no, to cut off all contact and move on with my life. But another part of me was curious. I wanted to see if he was really as different as he claimed to be. Okay, I typed back. Coffee. As friends. But if you even think about calling me bookworm, I'm walking out. Deal, he wrote. I promise, no bookworm references. We met for coffee a few days later. I was nervous, but also strangely excited. I didn't know what to expect. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table by the window. He stood up when he saw me, a genuine smile on his face. Hey, he said. Thanks for coming. Yeah, well, I'm still not sure this is a good idea, I replied, trying to sound nonchalant. I understand, he said, but I promise, I'm not going to ruin it. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. He told me about his job, his travels, his dreams for the future. He asked about my life, my passions, my fears. He listened attentively, without interrupting, without judging. And you know what? He was actually nice. Genuinely nice. He was intelligent, funny, and surprisingly self-aware. He seemed to have grown into a completely different person, someone who was kind, compassionate, and genuinely remorseful for his past actions. I still wasn't sure if I could completely forgive him for what he had done in high school. Those wounds ran deep, and they weren't going to heal overnight. But I was willing to give him a chance. A real chance. We went on a few more dates after that. We went to movies. We went to concerts. We went for long walks in the park. We talked, we laughed, and we even shared a few awkward but sweet kisses. And then, one night, after a particularly wonderful date, he told me he was falling in love with me. I didn't know what to say. I was still grappling with my feelings for him, still trying to reconcile the Mark Thompson I knew in high school with the Mark Thompson I was falling for now. I don't know what to say. I stammered. You don't have to say anything, he replied. Just think about it. I did think about it. I thought about it long and hard. I thought about the pain he had caused me in the past, and I thought about the joy he was bringing me in the present. I thought about the person he used to be, and I thought about the person he had become. And then, one day, I realized that I was falling in love with him too. It wasn't easy. It wasn't a fairy tale. There were still moments of doubt, moments of fear, moments when I wondered if I was making a mistake. But I knew that I couldn't let the past define my future. I had to give him, and myself, a chance at happiness. So I took a leap of faith. I told him I loved him too. And you know what? It was the best decision I ever made. Mark and I have been together for 5 years now. We're engaged to be married. He's my best friend, my confidant, and the love of my life. He still doesn't remember all the terrible things he did in high school, but he doesn't need to. He's made up for them 1,000 times over. He's shown me, through his actions, that he's a different person now. He's shown me that people can change, that forgiveness is possible, and that even the most unlikely of connections can lead to something beautiful. And it all started with I should have trusted my instincts when his first message was a picture of a taxidermied squirrel wearing a tiny top hat. I really should have. But in my defense, I was incredibly bored, newly single, and the squirrel was admittedly pretty dapper. His Tinder profile was eccentric, a collection of blurry photos of him doing strange things, like building miniature furniture for dolls in a park, wearing a full suit of armor while grocery shopping, and staring intently at a pigeon for an uncomfortably long amount of time. His bio read, "Seeking someone who appreciates the absurd." I apparently qualified. We messaged back and forth for a few days, and the absurdity only intensified. He claimed to be a professional mime, a red flag I somehow glossed over, insisted that pigeons are government spies, and sent me a detailed schematic for a pigeon-proof umbrella hat. It was all so bizarre that it was almost charming. I chalked it up to artistic quirkiness and a slightly warped sense of humor. Plus, he was surprisingly witty and articulate, which made the whole thing even more confusing. His name was Bartholomew, or Bart for short. He suggested we meet at a local coffee shop, and against my better judgment, I agreed. I told myself it would be a good story, at the very least. I even prepped a few emergency escape routes in my head, just in case he turned out to be a complete psycho. I arrived at the coffee shop a few minutes early, scanning the crowd for someone who looked like they owned a suit of armor or had an unhealthy obsession with pigeons. Then I saw him. He was sitting at a corner table, wearing a beret and sketching furiously in a notebook. He looked normal, almost disappointingly so. He stood up when he saw me, a genuine smile spreading across his face. He was taller than I expected, with kind eyes and a surprisingly gentle demeanor. He didn't immediately launch into a conspiracy theory or start miming an invisible box, which I considered a good sign. We made small talk, ordered our drinks, and settled into a surprisingly pleasant conversation. He asked about my job, my hobbies, my favorite books. He listened attentively, making eye contact and nodding thoughtfully. He even laughed at my jokes, which is always a plus. For a brief moment, I thought maybe I had misjudged him. Maybe he was just a slightly quirky guy with a passion for the unconventional. Maybe the taxidermied squirrel was just a harmless oddity. But then, things took a turn. He started talking about his research. Apparently, his passion for pigeons wasn't just a hobby. It was a full-blown scientific investigation. He believed pigeons were not just spies, but were actually highly intelligent, telepathic beings capable of controlling human behavior. He claimed to have evidence, meticulously collected over years of observation, that proved his theory. He pulled out his notebook, flipping through pages filled with sketches of pigeons, diagrams of their brains, and cryptic notes written in a language I couldn't decipher. He explained his theories in detail, using scientific jargon and complex arguments. He even showed me a chart comparing the flight patterns of pigeons to the stock market fluctuations, claiming it was proof of their manipulative powers. I tried to politely steer the conversation in a different direction, but he was relentless. He was completely consumed by his pigeon obsession, and he was determined to convince me of its validity. He spoke with such conviction and intensity that it was almost unsettling. As he rambled on about pigeon telepathy and government conspiracies, I started to notice other things. His eyes darted around the room, as if he was constantly on the lookout for something. He kept fidgeting with his beret, adjusting it every few seconds. He seemed increasingly agitated, his voice rising in volume with each passing minute. Then he leaned in close, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "They're watching us, you know," he said, glancing nervously at the window. "The pigeons. They can hear everything we're saying." That was my cue. I stood up abruptly, knocking over my coffee cup in the process. "I'm so sorry, Bart," I said, feigning a look of panic. "I just remembered I have a dentist appointment. I have to go." He looked genuinely disappointed, but he didn't try to stop me. "But what about the pigeons?" he asked, his voice laced with desperation. "Don't you want to know the truth?" "Maybe another time," I said, backing away slowly. "I'll call you." I practically sprinted out of the coffee shop, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't stop running until I reached my car, where I locked the doors and took a deep breath. I should have trusted my instincts about the taxidermied squirrel. I should have run for the hills when he started talking about pigeon telepathy. But I didn't. And now, I was pretty sure I had just had a date with a certified lunatic. I didn't call him, obviously, I blocked his number and deleted him from Tinder. I tried to put the whole experience behind me, chalking it up to a bizarre dating mishap. But the pigeon thing stuck with me. Every time I saw a pigeon, I couldn't help but wonder if it was a government spy, secretly plotting to control my mind. I started avoiding parks and public squares, where pigeons congregated in large numbers. I even considered investing in a pigeon-proof umbrella hat. Then, a few weeks later, I received a package in the mail. It was a small, unmarked box. I hesitated before opening it, wondering if it was another pigeon-related conspiracy theory or, worse, a taxidermied squirrel. I carefully opened the box, and inside, I found a single object, a small, hand-carved wooden pigeon. It was beautifully crafted, with intricate details and a lifelike appearance. Attached to the pigeon was a note, written in Bart's distinctive handwriting. "They know." The note read, "They're always watching." I stared at the wooden pigeon, a chill running down my spine. I didn't know what to make of it. Was it a threat? A warning? Or just another example of Bart's eccentric behavior? I decided to err on the side of caution. I took the wooden pigeon outside and threw it in the trash. I double-checked my locks, closed all the curtains, and turned off the lights. I sat in the dark, listening to the sounds of the city outside. Every rustle of leaves, every chirp of a bird, every coo of a pigeon sent a shiver down my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. That night, I had a dream. I was standing in a crowded city square, surrounded by pigeons. They were perched on rooftops, on statues, on lampposts, their eyes fixed on me. They started cooing a low, guttural sound that grew louder and louder until it filled my ears. Then, the pigeons started to move. They swooped down from the sky, circling around me, their wings beating in a frantic rhythm. They pecked at my face, my arms, my legs, their beaks sharp and relentless. I woke up screaming, covered in sweat. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I was convinced that the pigeons were real, that they were coming for me. I spent the next few days in a state of near paranoia. I jumped at every shadow, flinched at every sound. I couldn't leave my apartment. I couldn't sleep. I was trapped in a nightmare of my own making. Finally, I decided I needed help. I called a therapist and made an appointment. I told her everything that had happened, from the taxidermied squirrel to the wooden pigeon. She listened patiently, without judgment. She told me that I was suffering from anxiety and that I had allowed Bart's eccentricities to prey on my fears. She helped me to see that the pigeons were just pigeons, and that Bart was just a harmless, albeit delusional individual. With her help, I started to regain my sense of perspective. I started to challenge my fears, to confront my anxieties. I even started to venture outside again, to walk through parks and public squares without feeling like I was being watched. It wasn't easy. There were still moments of doubt, moments of fear. But I learned to manage my anxiety, to control my thoughts, to trust my instincts. And I learned a valuable lesson about online dating. Always trust your instincts, especially when they tell you to run far, far away from anyone who owns a taxidermied squirrel. I still see pigeons sometimes, of course. They're everywhere. But now, when I see them, I don't think of government spies or telepathic control. I just think of Bart and I smile. He was a weirdo for sure. But he was also a reminder that life is full of surprises, and that sometimes the most unexpected encounters can lead to the most valuable lessons. And I learned to trust my gut next time. I didn't know whether to laugh or shudder. I never thought this would happen to me, but here I am, staring at the ceiling at 3:17 a.m., heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, replaying the whole damn Tinder date in my head like a broken record. I've been on Tinder for a while now, mostly just swiping out of boredom, occasionally going on a date when someone manages to pique my interest enough. I'm not looking for anything serious, just someone to grab a drink with, maybe watch a movie, and if there's chemistry, well, you know. But last week, I matched with someone who seemed different. His name was Alex, and his profile was refreshingly normal. No shirtless selfies, no cliché travel photos, just a few pictures of him smiling, one of him hiking with his dog, and a bio that said, "Looking for someone to explore the city with. Bonus points if you can handle spicy food." We started chatting, and the conversation flowed easily. He was funny, intelligent, and genuinely seemed interested in getting to know me. We talked about our favorite books, our dream travel destinations, and our shared love for obscure indie bands. He even sent me a playlist of some of his favorite songs, and I actually liked him. After a few days of texting, we decided to meet up for drinks at a new bar downtown. I was actually excited, which is rare for me when it comes to Tinder dates. I spent way too long picking out an outfit, second-guessing everything I tried on, and finally settled on a simple black dress and a pair of boots. I wanted to look cute, but not like I was trying too hard. When I arrived at the bar, Alex was already there, waiting for me. He looked even better in person than he did in his pictures. He had kind eyes, a warm smile, and a genuine air of sincerity about him. We hugged hello, and I immediately felt a sense of ease around him. The first hour of the date was amazing. We talked about everything and nothing, laughing and making easy conversation. He was charming, attentive, and genuinely seemed to enjoy my company. We even discovered that we had both been to the same music festival a few years ago and had probably walked right past each other without even knowing it. It felt like we were connecting on a deeper level than I usually experience on Tinder dates. But then, things started to get weird. It started subtly. He started asking me increasingly personal questions, like about my family dynamics, my past relationships, and my biggest fears. I didn't mind sharing some of it, but he was digging deep, and I started to feel a little uncomfortable. Then, he started talking about his ex-girlfriend. It's always a red flag when someone spends the entire date talking about their ex, but he wasn't just talking about her. He was obsessed with her. He described her as the perfect woman, the love of his life, and said that he still hadn't gotten over her, even though they had broken up years ago. He went on and on about how beautiful, intelligent, and amazing she was, and how she had inexplicably dumped him for some other guy. He couldn't understand why she had left him, and he was convinced that she was the only woman he could ever truly love. I tried to steer the conversation in a different direction, but he kept bringing it back to his ex. It was like he was trying to convince me of something, or maybe he was trying to convince himself. I started to feel like I was just a stand-in for her, a placeholder until she decided to come back to him. As the night wore on, Alex's behavior became increasingly erratic. He started drinking heavily, downing shots of tequila like they were water. He became louder, more animated, and increasingly touchy-feely. He kept putting his hand on my arm, my leg, my back, and I started to feel trapped. I tried to subtly pull away, but he didn't seem to notice. He was too caught up in his own world, lost in his memories of his ex-girlfriend and his self-pitying monologue. I started to feel a sense of dread creep over me. I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to be rude. I didn't want to cause a scene. But then, things took a turn for the worse. Alex excused himself to go to the bathroom, and I took the opportunity to text my best friend, Sarah. SOS, I typed. This date is a disaster. I need an escape plan. Sarah immediately replied, Where are you? I'll call you with a fake emergency. I told her the name of the bar, and within minutes, my phone was ringing. Hello. I answered, trying to sound as normal as possible. Oh my God. My name. I need you to come home right now. Sarah said, her voice filled with fake panic. There's a flood in your apartment. The ceiling is leaking, and everything is getting ruined. Oh no, I exclaimed, playing along. I'll be right there. I hung up the phone and turned to Alex, who had just returned from the bathroom. I'm so sorry, but I have to go, I said, trying to sound apologetic. There's a flood in my apartment, and I need to deal with it. Alex looked at me with a confused expression. A flood, he slurred. But we were having such a good time. I know, but I really have to go, I said, standing up and grabbing my purse. It was nice meeting you, Alex. Wait, he said, grabbing my arm. Don't go. Stay with me. We can talk more about my ex. I recoiled at his touch. I really can't, I said, pulling my arm away. I have to go. Please, he begged, his eyes pleading. Just one more drink. One more story about ex-girlfriend's name. You remind me so much of her. I was officially creeped out. I knew I had to get out of there fast. I'm sorry, Alex, but I really have to leave, I said, turning and walking towards the door. But then, he did something that I never expected. He grabbed my arm again, this time much harder, and pulled me back towards him. No, you're not going anywhere, he said, his voice low and menacing. You're going to stay here and listen to me. You're going to understand how much I loved her. I was terrified. I tried to pull away, but he was too strong. He had a grip on my arm that felt like a vice. I started to panic. Let go of me, I shouted, trying to break free. You're hurting me. But he didn't let go. He just stared at me with those vacant, obsessed eyes, his grip tightening on my arm. I was trapped, and I didn't know what to do. Luckily, the bartender saw what was happening and came over to intervene. "Hey, is everything okay here?" he asked, his voice firm. Alex looked up at the bartender, his expression shifting from menacing to confused. "Yeah, everything's fine," he said, releasing my arm. "We were just having a conversation." "It didn't look like a conversation," the bartender said, his eyes narrowed. "Maybe you should give her some space." Alex hesitated for a moment, then finally stepped back. "Fine," he said, his voice sullen. "Go ahead and leave. See if I care." I didn't waste any time. I turned and ran out of the bar, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't stop running until I reached my apartment, where I collapsed on my couch, shaking and sobbing. I spent the rest of the night replaying the date in my head, trying to make sense of what had happened. How could someone seem so normal and charming at first, only to reveal such a dark and disturbing side? How could I have been so wrong about him? I deleted Alex from Tinder, blocked his number, and deactivated my profile. I didn't want him to be able to contact me again. I was scared that he might try to find me, to continue his obsession with his ex-girlfriend. I haven't been on Tinder since that night. I'm too afraid of running into another Alex, another person who seems normal on the surface, but is hiding something sinister underneath. I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust someone I meet online again. The worst part is, I still don't know what Alex wanted from me. Was he just lonely and looking for someone to listen to his story? Or was he looking for something more? Was he trying to replace his ex-girlfriend with me? Was he capable of something violent? I may never know the answers to these questions, and that's what scares me the most. I just hope that I never have to see Alex again, and that no one else has to experience what I went through that night. I never thought this would happen to me, but it did, and it's a reminder that you can never truly know someone, especially someone you meet on Tinder. I never wanted this night. It's been weeks, and I never go anywhere. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but matching with Liam on Tinder felt different. I know, everyone says that, right? But hear me out. I was in that post-breakup, I need to reinvent myself phase, which apparently meant downloading Tinder after years of swearing it off as shallow and superficial. I told myself it was just for fun, a way to meet new people, expand my social circle, blah, blah, blah. The usual excuses. I swiped right on a million guys, mostly based on their photos, which, let's be honest, is how most people use the app. I matched with a few, had some boring conversations, and went on a couple of disastrous dates. Then Liam appeared. His profile wasn't the typical shirtless gym selfie or the cliché hiking in the mountains shot. He had a picture of himself reading in a coffee shop, one of him volunteering at an animal shelter, and another of him playing the guitar at what looked like an open mic night. Intriguing, right? His bio was simple. Looking for someone to share stories and adventures with. No cheesy pickup lines, no arrogance, just genuine sincerity. I swiped right without hesitation. We matched instantly, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. He wasn't pushy or overly complimentary. He asked thoughtful questions about my interests, my dreams, and my fears. We talked about books, movies, music, and travel. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, not just trying to get me into bed. It was refreshing, to say the least. After a week of nonstop texting, we decided to meet up. He suggested a small, independent bookstore that had a cozy cafe inside. Perfect, I thought. It was a low-pressure, public place where we could chat and see if the spark was real. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting at a table near the window, reading a book. He looked even better in person than in his photos. He had kind eyes, a warm smile, and an easygoing demeanor that immediately put me at ease. We talked for hours that night, losing track of time as we delved into deep conversations about life, love, and everything in between. It felt like I had known him forever. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of dates, laughter, and shared experiences. We went to art galleries, concerts, and hiking trails. We cooked dinner together, watched movies, and stayed up late talking about our hopes and dreams. I was falling hard, and I didn't care. He was everything I had ever wanted in a partner. Kind, intelligent, funny, and passionate. But then, things started to get weird. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. He would ask me questions about my past, not in a casual, getting-to-know-you way, but with a strange intensity. He wanted to know every detail of my previous relationships, every mistake I had made, every regret I had. He seemed obsessed with understanding my pain. At first, I brushed it off as him being empathetic, wanting to know me on a deeper level. But then he started asking about my friends and family. He wanted to know their names, their addresses, their daily routines. He even asked to see pictures of them, scrutinizing their faces as if he were trying to solve a puzzle. I started to feel uneasy. It felt like he was collecting information, building a profile of everyone in my life. I tried to tell myself I was being paranoid, that he was just curious, but the feeling wouldn't go away. Then there was the incident with my ex. One night, after a particularly intense conversation about my past relationship, Liam asked if I was still in contact with my ex. I told him no, that we hadn't spoken in months, and that I had no desire to rekindle things. He seemed satisfied with my answer, but the next day, my ex called me out of the blue. He was furious, accusing me of spreading rumors about him and his new girlfriend. He said he had received anonymous messages online, threatening him and his family. He had no idea who was sending them, but he suspected it was me. I was shocked and confused. I hadn't sent any messages, and I had no idea what he was talking about. I tried to explain this to him, but he wouldn't listen. He hung up on me, convinced that I was behind it all. I was shaken. I couldn't understand why my ex would think I was capable of something like that. And then it hit me. Liam. He had been so interested in my past relationship, so eager to learn about my ex. Had he been using that information to sabotage him? Was he trying to isolate me from everyone in my life? I confronted Liam that night. I told him about the phone call with my ex and accused him of sending the messages. He denied everything, of course. He said I was being crazy, that I was letting my insecurities get the best of me. He even turned it around on me, accusing me of still being in love with my ex. I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was lying. There was something in his eyes, a coldness, a darkness that I hadn't seen before. I decided to do some digging. I started by searching his name online, hoping to find some clues about his past. What I found was disturbing. There were several online forums and social media groups dedicated to exposing online dating predators. And there, among the warnings and accusations, was Liam's picture. According to the posts, Liam had a history of manipulating and harassing women he met on dating apps. He would gain their trust, learn their secrets, and then use that information to control and isolate them. Some women claimed he had stalked them, threatened them, and even physically assaulted them. I was horrified. I had been so blind, so naive. I had fallen for his charm, his intelligence, his apparent sincerity. But it was all a facade. He was a dangerous predator, and I had let him into my life. I knew I had to get away from him, but I was scared. I didn't know what he was capable of, or how far he would go to keep me under his control. I decided to end things with him over text, thinking it would be the safest way to distance myself. His response was immediate. He sent a barrage of texts, begging me to talk to him, promising to change, swearing that he loved me. I ignored them, knowing that anything I said would only fuel his obsession. I blocked his number, deleted him from all my social media accounts, and changed my passwords. I told my friends and family what had happened, and they rallied around me, offering support and protection. I even considered going to the police, but I didn't have any concrete evidence of his wrongdoing. For a few weeks, things were quiet. I started to relax, thinking that maybe I had gotten away with it. But then, the messages started again. They weren't coming from Liam's number, but from anonymous accounts online. They were cryptic, threatening, and deeply personal. They referenced things that only Liam and I knew, things that I had never told anyone else. He was stalking me, watching me, and using my own secrets against me. I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare, with no escape. One night, I came home from work and found a note on my doorstep. It was written in Liam's handwriting. "I know everything about you." It read, "I know where you live, where you work, who your friends are. You can't hide from me. I will always find you." That was the last straw. I went to the police. This time, they took me seriously. They had received similar reports about Liam from other women, and they had enough evidence to obtain a restraining order. They warned me that Liam was dangerous, and that I should take every precaution to protect myself. I moved out of my apartment, changed my phone number again, and went into hiding. I stayed with friends and family, constantly looking over my shoulder, fearing that Liam would find me. Weeks turned into months, and still, the fear lingered. I knew that Liam was out there, somewhere, waiting for his chance to strike. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me, always watching me. I still use Tinder, but now I am aware of who is out there. I have learned my lesson, but sometimes I wish I had never matched with Liam.